The evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Dr. Anthony Boyd of 31 Park Mansions, Fulchester.
I am
What is your position at present, Doctor?
a consultant neurologist at St. Mark's Hospital, Fulchester.
Are you a trustee of a registered charity known as the Healing Hand?
Yes?
The only other trustee being the accused, the Reverend Francis King.
Reverend Francis King, yes.
The Reverend King is accused of theft from the Healing Hand. It is alleged he took sums from the charity amounting to £4,650 between April 1973 and April 1974.
When was the Healing Hand founded?
It was registered as a charity in July 1969.
With what object?
The setting up of homes for the medical and nursing care of chronic conditions.
My lord, the precise objective of the Healing Hand is a major area of dispute.
Quite so, Mr. Honeycomb. Your personal intention, Dr. Boyd, was that the home should provide nursing and medical care for the chronically ill. Have I got that right?
Perfectly correct, my lord. And that was what was agreed, not his faith healing.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd.
Chronically ill. Can you define chronic for us, Doctor?
Oh, it simply means that the illnesses persist over a long period of time. The intention was to provide residential care for the more severe cases of multiple sclerosis and other disabling diseases.
You left the country in March 1973.
To take up a research appointment in America, yes.
Returning when?
It was a year's appointment.
What did you find when you visited the Healing Hand on your return?
Well, that hypocrite had been lining his pockets with the charity's money.
Dr. Boyd, it is the purpose of this trial to find whether this is proved. You must not make that kind of remark in this court.
I do apologize, my lord, but Reverend King is someone who does arouse the strongest feelings in some people.
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
In what state did you find the accounts when you returned?
Oh, an appalling state. The books had been neglected. It was almost impossible to find out what had been going on, but there was one set of records which was quite clear. The bank account. Cash and securities had been taken from it, amounting to £24,650.
Do you know who'd taken this money?
Well, King, of course.
Mr. O'Connor, Mr. King's not charged with stealing £24,650?
No, my lord. £20,000 was used to purchase a house at Oaks Green. Wrongly, according to the prosecution, but this amount is recoverable. However, the £4,650 is irrecoverable.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor.
Now, did you speak with the accused about this substantial sum of apparently missing money?
Oh, yes.
What did he say when you asked him about the missing money?
I've spent it.
King answered like that?
Yes.
It being the £4,650?
Yes, my lord. He said, I'm afraid you'll find things in rather a mess, but I have got all the receipts somewhere, pulling bits of paper out of his pocket.
And did he have all the receipts somewhere?
No.
May the witness be shown Exhibit 1, please.
Thank you.
Now, is this a copy of the list that you eventually drew up?
Yes, this is the list.
Minibus, £1,200. Fee for architect, £500. Housekeeper, £1,200. Petrol repairs, etc. for minibus, £650. No complete receipts. Chapel furnishings, tapestries, cross, etc. Again, no complete receipts. £700. Other running expenses, £400. No receipts whatsoever. Total £4,650. Dr. Boyd, did you agree to any of this expenditure?
No, I did not.
Mr. O'Connor, this minibus, isn't that partly recoverable?
It was involved in an accident, my lord, and has been written off.
And the insurance?
It was not insured, my lord. Are these expenditures all connected with the house at Oaks Green?
Yes.
Did you agree to the purchase of this house?
No, I did not.
Now, was there any activity at Oaks Green connected with the work and objectives of the Healing Hand?
In my opinion, absolutely none.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd.
Dr. Boyd, why did you call the charity the Healing Hand?
I didn't.
Oh, but you agreed to the name, presumably.
Presumably.
Well, did you or didn't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, it means or implies faith healing, does it not?
The jury must hear your answers, Dr. Boyd.
Well, it means or implies nothing of the sort, my lord.
Faith healers pass their hands round the affected part of the body, do they not?
I believe so.
Is that action where the name came from?
No.
Then what does the name mean, Dr. Boyd?
Mean? Well, a surgeon uses his hands to operate. A doctor uses his hands to examine, hopefully to help cure the patient. This was the healing hand, not that.
I'd like to refer your lordship to Exhibit 4, the trust deed. Now, is that a copy of the original deed registered with the Charity Commissioners on July the 14th, 1969?
Yes, it is.
Has that deed ever been countermanded?
No.
Added to or revised in any way?
No.
No. Would you read out to the court, please, the first sentence of paragraph 3, Dr. Boyd?
Yes. The prime objective of the healing hand shall be to provide medical and spiritual care for the chronically sick.
Medical and spiritual care. Yet when you were discussing the objectives with my learned friend just now, you said medical and nursing care. Slip of the tongue, no doubt?
No.
No? Well, do you mean to say that your views have changed? That in 1969 you believed that spiritual care was important and now you do not?
No, my views have never changed.
Really? Dr. Boyd, do I understand you correctly? That can surely only mean that you signed this, a legal document, while disagreeing with one of the main objectives in it, can't it?
No. The prime objective of the healing hand was medical care, naturally.
Well, that's not made clear here, is it? You did sign this.
I had to.
Had to?
Well, to get the money, to start the project. You see, as a neurologist, I have to deal with many cases of multiple sclerosis. Now, this is a filthy disease which attacks the nerves, or rather the protective sheath around them. The victims, mainly young adults, may be badly and progressively disabled. Now, there was and is inadequate, specialized nursing home provision for the more severe cases in the latter stages of the disease. I have known patients still comparatively young die in geriatric wards. Well, then in 1968, I had a golden opportunity. I met a Harry Wyatt, who was a trustee of the Jordan Foundation. Now, this is a trust with an enormous amount of money just sitting there doing nothing. There was only one problem. It was a religious foundation.
Ah, a religious foundation, I see. Now, tell me, when did you first meet the Reverend Francis King?
In 1968.
That was before the Jordan Foundation opportunity arose?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And you went along together to that foundation?
Yes.
As a result of which a substantial grant was made?
Yes.
Well, to put it crudely, Dr. Boyd, you used the Reverend Francis King to get what you wanted. And then after that, you'd have been quite happy to drop him altogether, wouldn't you?
No, I wouldn't put it like that.
Oh, no, I'm sure you wouldn't.
No, this is ridiculous. It's simply a question of emphasis. I wouldn't have signed that document if I hadn't felt that there could be some level of spiritual care. Of course I wouldn't. Does that make you any happier?
Some level of spiritual care. Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Now, this is not a very specific document, is it? I mean, it doesn't lay down exact amounts and percentages, so much to be spent on the medical side, so much on the spiritual side, does it?
No.
No. Now, what do you understand by the words spiritual care?
Oh, religious help?
Would that reasonably include visits from a minister of religion?
Oh, yes, of course.
Prayers?
Yes.
Religious services?
It's possible.
Healing services?
Oh, no, definitely not.
No, well, this document doesn't exclude them, does it?
No, we had agreed to exclude them.
Oh, had you really? When was that?
Well, when we got the Jordan money. I can't remember the exact date.
No? Well, let me help you. Was it April the 1st, 1969, at the Great Western Hotel, Fulchester?
April Fool's Day, yes, it was.
What happened on that day, please?
Well, we had lunch with the active trustee of the Jordan Foundation. They just then agreed to give us the £90,000 capital grant, together with further sums to cover running expenses for 3 years.
You made written submissions to the foundations for this money?
Oh, yes, of course, quite a number.
Yes. Is this a copy of one of them? Exhibit 5, my lord.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Now, paragraph 10. The home will have a private chapel.
Within the building.
It doesn't say that.
No, but this is what we had discussed. A room within the home where he could, well, fiddle about to his heart's content.
Was there a witness to this discussion?
No, Wyatt had already gone home.
Was it an amicable discussion?
Oh, yes, yes.
You were good friends then?
Friends. I didn't know him then quite as well as I do now.
No. Where did you have this discussion?
In the bar. We had a few drinks. We were elated at the ground.
Yes, and then?
We went home.
Oh, nothing else happened of note?
No.
Dr. Boyd, do you suffer from a bad back? Slip disc? Did you knock a glass from the bar, jump to get it, and injure your back? And did the Reverend Francis King cure it?
Well, I was in a very euphoric mood, dropped my glass, dived for it, felt something go in my back. Well, naturally, the descent from extreme euphoria to acute anxiety probably exaggerated the pain out of all proportion. Well, he's a very soothing chap to have around in a situation like that. I wouldn't deny that for a moment.
He passed his hands round your back?
Yes, yes.
And the pain went, did it? And did you say, that's a miracle?
If it's at all relevant, I said that's a bloody miracle. In the same way that I might say to you, you're a bloody genius.
Thank you. Now, before you went to America, what was Mr. King's role at the home exactly?
Well, he used to come in several times a week, potted about, chatted to people.
Did he practice faith healing?
No.
No?
Well, not officially. It was definitely never within the stated policy of the home. Before I went to the States, I regarded him as a frequent visitor who could boost people's morale. He was quite helpful at that stage.
Quite helpful. So helpful, in fact, that in March 1973, one of the residents, Gerald Brady, claimed that Mr. King had cured him.
He claimed that, yes.
Well, didn't that upset you?
No. He was having a normal remission of symptoms.
Ah, yes, but the claim that he made. Didn't the claim upset you? If faith healing was against the policy of the home?
No, I couldn't stop it if someone wanted to have their hands held and prayers said over them. It would have been quite wrong of me to stop it. It would have been an interference with that individual's freedom. You see, you really must understand that multiple sclerosis, which Gerald Brady and a lot of our first patients suffered from, is incurable, but there are remissions. The symptoms, muscular weakness, impairment of eyesight, may be reduced. Perhaps for 2 months, perhaps for 30 years. Now, this is normal. Now, this makes it, as a disease, a faith healer's paradise, because on the one hand, everybody knows that there's very little that doctors can do. But half of those who get it can expect some remission of symptoms. Now, when that happens, the last person who touched them can claim the credit for it.
So you knew that that kind of work was going on?
Yes, but it was essentially private work. It was something between King and the resident. It was nothing to do with the home.
Before you left for America, did you have a meeting with Mr. King?
Yes, at Market Cross, the nursing home, on March the... may I use my diary, my lord? Okay. March the... yes, 30th of March, 73.
Were any other people present?
Not initially. No, it was a trustee's meeting, just the two of us, and then later on Miss Fanshawe, the matron of the nursing home, joined us.
Yes, well, now let's take the first part of that meeting, shall we? You and Mr. King alone. What did you discuss?
A policy during my absence. It was to be a holding year. Expenditure was to be kept to a minimum. Nothing major came up.
No, not the house?
Oh, no.
Not Oaks Green?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Why do you hesitate?
Because it was discussed round that time, but not at that meeting. I'm positive about that.
Oh? Had you seen the house then?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Had you considered buying it?
Considered. We went around it. We were thinking in terms of a second home because the first one had been so successful. But I felt that it was, well, quite unsuitable for conversion and that the price was ridiculous.
Yes. Now, what price was it in 1972?
26,000.
26,000. So it would have been a bargain then at 20.
It was too small. It was quite unsuitable. The only thing it was suitable for was what he eventually turned it into. A sort of Fulchester Lourdes with cures at £5 a time. God knows what, trinkets on the side.
Yeah. Did Mr. King put up a scheme for buying it at the March 30th meeting?
No.
Did you say that the price rendered such a scheme unfeasible?
My lord, since no such scheme has been admitted by the witness, how can he be questioned on its economic feasibility?
Quite so, Mr. O'Connor.
My lord. Now, look at these, please. Will you? Exhibit 7, my lord. The cheques. The cheques by which the £4,650 was withdrawn. Now, these are signed by Mr. King, and they're countersigned by a J.W. Morgan. Can you explain that to the jury, please?
Yes. Before I went to the States, I executed a power of attorney in favour of a colleague of mine, John Morgan. He was to act on my behalf while I was away.
Morgan was your senior consultant at St. Mark's Hospital.
Yes.
And he authorised all these expenditures.
That's easy to explain.
Is it?
Well, King can be very convincing.
Can he?
Well, he went along with the cheques when John Morgan was a very ill man. The poor man didn't know what he was signing.
Dr. Boyd, your opinion of Mr. Morgan's judgment at that time is not admissible. Members of the jury, you will disregard that statement. Mr. Morgan, is he dead?
Yes, unfortunately he is, my lord. Now, you're an ambitious man, Dr. Boyd.
I suppose so, yes.
You were a consultant at 34. That's pretty good going, isn't it?
Not bad.
And are you in line for Mr. Morgan's old post, that of senior consultant, which is still vacant?
Yes.
Yes, that'd be even better going at 42, wouldn't it?
If I'm fortunate enough to be appointed, yes.
Ah, yes, yes. Now, is one of the members of the hospital committee advising on this appointment a Dr. Melvin Squires?
Yes.
And is not Dr. Squires a most formidable and vociferous opponent of faith healing?
Is he?
Oh, come, Dr. Boyd. You can hardly tell me you've overlooked the correspondence which he initiated in the British Medical Journal.
Oh, yes. He's made it quite plain.
Did he make his views plain to you personally?
Oh, really, my lord? What sort of question's that?
Oh, my lord, I'm perfectly happy to leave this matter for the moment.
Very well.
Now, how many times did you visit the Healing Hand in 1972? That's the year before you went to America.
Can't remember.
Well, fortunately, you don't have to. Miss Fanshawe, matron of the home, kept excellent records. They show that you visited the home 4 times in 1 year.
Oh, it was more than that.
Oh, are the records wrong then?
Well, I kept in touch frequently, by letter, by phone. I'm an extremely busy man.
Of course you are, Dr. Boyd, of course you are. You're a member of a number of medical committees, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, and as well as your hospital consultancy, you have an extensive private practice?
I have some private patients.
A lot of irons in the fire, haven't you?
I can cope.
How long were you in America?
A year?
March the 1st, 1973 to the end of April 1974. That's 14 months, isn't it? Leaving the Reverend Mr. King and a sick man to cope with the responsibilities of the home. When did you first visit the home on your return?
4th of May.
Mm-hmm. What were your reactions?
My reactions?
Yes, Dr. Boyd, your immediate reactions.
Well, I found that the matron, Miss Fanshawe, had left. There was a picture of Jesus in the hall. It was like a spiritualist church. And he was living like a lord at Oaks Green.
Did you look at the accounts?
Oh, yes.
And did you add up that sum of £4,650 on that day?
Not on that day.
No?
Well, things were in such a mess. I told him to sort them out, and then we'd have a further meeting.
You were scandalized.
Well, yes, I was.
So scandalized, in fact, that the meeting took place when?
June 22nd.
June the 22nd. Now, June the 22nd... yes, May the 4th to June the 22nd is 7 weeks.
Yes, I had a lot to sort out when I got back from
Yes,
the
it
States.
seems so. Now, tell me what happened on June the 21st.
June the 21st?
Let me help you. Did you on that day receive notification from the Charities Commission that the healing hand was to be investigated and its accounts were to be produced?
Oh, was that the day? Yes. Well, he had started a stupid collection box scheme which was so badly administered that they'd started to investigate it.
Which would expose the healing hand to the public gaze.
Yes?
Wasn't it then, Dr. Boyd, that for the first time you began to make suitably horrified noises about the faith-healing activities that had been going on for so long?
I don't know what you mean.
I think you do, Dr. Boyd, I think you do. As soon as the matter becomes public, you visit the home on June the 22nd, June the 23rd, and June the 25th, 3 times in 4 days. That's an all-time record for you, isn't it? And I suggest to you that one thing is in the forefront of your mind, your future medical career. The senior positions in the Fulchester Hospital are chosen by a committee dominated by a man who detests faith healing. Now, at all costs, because you're an extremely ambitious man, Dr. Boyd, aren't you? Now that this is all open, now that it's all public, at all costs, including the Reverend Francis King, you must say that you condemn faith healing and say that you have always condemned it.
This is ridiculous.
Yes, it is ridiculous, Dr. Boyd. Because I suggest to you that it has turned what should be a case of negligence before the charity commissioners into the criminal prosecution of an innocent man. Oh, yes, the books may be badly kept. Some of the purchases bizarre. But all these checks, all this £4,650 comes within the legitimate objectives of the healing hand, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
No. He spent the money on himself. It's so obvious.
The case of the Queen against King will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court. The Reverend Francis King is accused of stealing £4,650 from the charity The Healing Hand, of which he's a trustee. His defence argues that the money was spent within one of the charity's aims to provide spiritual care. Dr. Boyd, the other trustee, denies this meant spiritual healing and contends that the money was taken and used without his knowledge or consent. But King's counsel has suggested that Dr. Boyd has now a professional interest in denying any connection in the past with faith healing. The Healing Hand runs a home for the disabled where Miss Fanshawe was matron.
As I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Miss Fanshawe, you were matron of the Healing Hands home at Market Cross from 1970, when it was established, until March 1974.
Yes.
You are an SRN and have held responsible positions in various hospitals.
Yes.
Can you describe the state of the Healing Hands home in March 1973, when Dr. Boyd left for America?
We were the best equipped home for the disabled in Fulchester.
Can you describe the state in April 1974, 11 months later, when you left the home?
Well, people were disturbed, unhappy, all because of him.
What happened to create this unhappy situation?
He more or less moved in. He began to do more of his faith healing. He's a very cunning man. He put some of the residents against us.
Now, this house at Oaks Green, the house where Mr. King lives, did it come up in conversation that you had with Dr. Boyd and Mr. King after their meeting on March the 30th, 1973?
Well, I can't remember whether it was talked about then or not. It had become a joke.
A joke?
He said the Lord had instructed him to buy it.
The Lord?
I believe the witness means God, my lord.
Do you?
Yes, my lord.
Dr. Boyd was against the purchase of it, then?
Oh, yes. He said if the Lord wanted it, perhaps the Lord would provide the money.
What were your reactions when Mr. King did buy it?
Well, I was puzzled, worried. But I was not a trustee. He told me that the price dropping from £26,000 to £20,000 altered everything, and he'd informed Dr. Boyd.
Informed him? How?
He said he'd cabled him.
And you believed him?
Well, of course I did. I had no idea what was going to happen.
What did happen, Miss Fanshawe?
He furnished part of Oaks Green and began to live there. He bought the minibus, mostly for himself, though he did take some of the residents over to his home for what he called healing services, completely disrupting our routine.
If Mr. King had been planning to turn Oaks Green into a nursing home, shouldn't you have been consulted?
Well, yes. Mr. King has no idea at all of the requirements of a nursing home.
Housekeeper, £1,200. Did she benefit the residents?
No, she looked after him.
£400 running expenses. Have you any idea what these expenses
No,
were?
none at all.
Now, you resigned from the Healing Hand and left at the beginning of April 1974. What made you do that?
He was claiming cures. People would suddenly arrive at the home without an appointment and ask to be cured of arthritis, cancer, boils, anything. The whole system was disrupted. Then one day the police came. He'd started a silly collection box scheme. And although we were registered as a charity, he hadn't told the local police, which you must do.
And what did the police do?
Oh, he handled them. But it upset me having the police there on top of everything else. I went to see Mr. Morgan.
Oh, yes, the man that Dr. Boyd appointed to have power of attorney whilst he was in America.
Yes. Well, he was ill. Cancer. I couldn't seem to get through to him.
Did he make any comment?
My lord, this conversation must be hearsay evidence and therefore inadmissible.
Yes, Mr. Honeycomb. Mr. O'Connor, confine yourself to asking what happened and not what was said in the defendant's absence.
Yes, my lord. How was Mr. Morgan? I mean, did he appear normal to you?
No, he was strange. He was refusing drugs. Well, Mr. King had got at him. He was visiting him regularly. And Mr. Morgan seemed to be... Well, I don't know how to describe it. Under his influence.
When you left Mr. Morgan, what did you do?
Well, I put in my resignation, and then I wrote to the charity commissioners.
Thank you, Miss Fanshawe. Remain where you are, please.
Miss Fanshawe, do you believe in God?
I'm Church of England.
Well, the Church of England believes in God, doesn't it?
Yes. I believe, not strongly. I mean, I'm not a fanatic.
No, you're a Christian, but not a practicing Christian. Would it be fair to say that?
Yes.
But there are still some Christians amongst us who practice their strong beliefs, aren't there?
Yes.
But if a man says, the Lord has instructed me to buy this house, that's a joke, is it? I mean, it was a joke, Oaks Green, you said.
Well, only because he was on about it all the time.
Joke between you and Dr. Boyd.
Yes.
But not to Mr. King.
He wanted it for himself, not God. I'm sorry, but he did.
Well, let's have a look at some of this allegedly stolen money, shall we? Now, this payment of £1,200 to the housekeeper at Oaks Green, Mrs. Lloyd. Mrs. Lloyd is a retired lady, isn't she?
Yes.
Do you know what her occupation was before she retired?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a nurse. But she spent her time cleaning up and cooking for him.
Did she also look after the residents from Market Cross when they came over in the minibus?
Yes, but that wasn't very often.
Wasn't it?
No.
Why was that? Was it because you wouldn't give permission?
It was because he was always at Market Cross interfering, poking his nose into everything.
Well, as a trustee, didn't he have the right to do that?
Well, not the way he went about things.
I mean, it wasn't your way.
He had no idea how to deal with sick people. He would encourage people to get up and walk who had no hope of ever doing so. He raised expectations where there were none. It was cruel, it was wrong, it upset the whole system.
Miss Fanshawe, in your testimony to me and to my colleague, you have used the word system several times. Now, I'm implying no criticism when I say that you are a very systematic, a very ordered kind of person, aren't you?
Well, yes.
Yes, indeed, it's a quality required in and fostered by your profession, isn't it?
Yes.
Market Cross had a high standard of nursing, was clean, well-equipped, and had an orderly routine before Dr. Boyd went away.
Yes.
Now, into all this order walks the Reverend Francis King, putting up religious paintings, laying his hands on patients, uttering healing prayers and so forth. It disturbed the whole routine, didn't it?
Yes.
But in doing that, he wasn't taking anything from the residents, was he? I mean, wasn't he rather trying to give them something?
Yes. Mumbo jumbo.
Yes, to you, to your systematic mind. But wasn't his intention to give?
He gave them nothing. He upset them.
Wasn't it rather that he upset you? Now, in August 1973, most of your residents had multiple sclerosis, is that right?
8 of them.
Did Mr. King hold a healing service for them at Oaks Green on August the 20th?
Tea on his back lawn.
You weren't there, were you?
No, but neither were you, so how do you know it was a service? Oh, I'm sorry.
He took the party in the minibus?
Yes.
The minibus was at the disposal of the home, wasn't it?
No, he treated it as his car.
Well, why didn't he buy a car? Now, Miss Fanshawe, Dr. Boyd says that there's little that doctors can do about multiple sclerosis. Do you agree with him?
Well, that's true for the moment. Drugs can relieve symptoms. Dieting may help.
Yes, and faith healing?
Faith healing is cruel. It makes them hope.
Hope is bad, is it?
Yes. Well, when you see someone who can scarcely see, who prays, who is given hope, who wakes up in the morning and opens her eyes and prays and wakes up the next morning, then it's bad, yes.
Yes, but look, we have a situation here, haven't we, where orthodox methods can do very little. Now, the trust deed allows for money to be spent on spiritual care.
No.
No? Have you read the trust deed?
Now, yes. But when I talked over the job with Dr. Boyd and Mr. King, the idea was an orthodox nursing home. I wouldn't have accepted the job otherwise.
You're very loyal to Dr. Boyd, aren't you?
He's a first-rate doctor.
Did he visit the home much?
He's a very busy man.
Yes. You worked on his unit at St. Mark's Hospital, didn't you?
Yes, I was ward sister.
For how long?
6 years.
You've got to know him very well in that period?
We had a good professional relationship.
Yes. I'm not implying anything else, Miss Fanshawe. Now, he had a high opinion of you.
Well, I suppose so, yes.
And you thought so highly of him that you agreed to take on a job which you heartily disliked.
That's not true.
Ah, well, that you didn't particularly like them.
It's true I prefer to work in big hospitals. But somebody had to do the job. Dr. Boyd persuaded me. I think I did a good job, as well as I possibly could.
I'm sure you did. But you did it rather as a duty.
Yes, I suppose so.
For Dr. Boyd. And then he left for America, where he stayed for 14 months instead of 12. You see, something puzzles me, Miss Fanshawe. While all this was going on, the purchase of Oaks Green, the alleged thefts flowing from that purchase, the sinister influencing of a sick trustee, you never once did anything to get in touch with Dr. Boyd about this. Now, why?
He was in America.
Yes, but if it all became as serious as you say, wasn't it your duty to get in touch with him? I mean, he was still a trustee. Wasn't it your duty?
Yes.
The jury cannot hear you, Miss Fanshawe.
I'm sorry. Yes.
You did nothing about it.
Yes.
Do you mean yes, you did write to him?
Yes.
Were you in correspondence with him all the time he was away?
At long intervals, 2, 3 months. He hasn't much time for personal things.
Told him about the purchase of Oaks Green?
Yes.
Did he reply?
Yes, he sent a card.
Postcard?
Yes, saying he was writing to Mr. King and Mr. Morgan.
Did he do so?
Well, I don't know.
Now, your visit to Mr. Morgan was, when?
Just before Christmas, 1973.
Did you write to Dr. Boyd after that?
Yes.
Did he reply?
He sent another postcard. Keep going, back beginning February.
Yes, but he didn't, in fact, get back until the end of April, 2 months later. You felt let down, left in the lurch, didn't you? Is that really why you left?
No.
One of the reasons?
I left because he was I'm sorry. Mishandling charity funds. Sick people were being cheated. It was wrong, all wrong.
One last question, Miss Fanshawe. Where are you working now?
St. Mark's?
Back on Dr. Boyd's unit?
Yes.
Thank you.
And nothing but the truth. So help me God.
You are the Reverend Francis King of 5 Victoria Lodge, Fulchester.
Mr. Honeycomb, I have the defendant's address as Oaks Green, Maybury, near Fulchester.
Yes, my lord.
No, just a moment. I have it as both places.
Yes, I'm afraid there has been some confusion, my lord.
Evidently, Mr. Honeycomb. Mr. King, where do you live?
Where I happen to be.
But where is your home?
I haven't one.
Mr. Honeycomb, does your client mean that so far from having 2 addresses, he's of no fixed abode?
My lord, I do apologize for the apparent confusion.
It's not just apparent, Mr. Honeycomb.
No, my lord, I do apologize. But my client's answer is a serious one. He does not believe in possessions, nor in a home in the normal sense of that word.
Foxes have holes, birds in the air have their resting places, but those who do God's work have nowhere to lay their heads.
God's work presumably requires some use of the postal services.
Oh, yes.
Where's your postal address?
5 Victoria Lodge, Fulchester Road.
Thank you. And where have you normally been sleeping during the past 2 years?
Oaks Green, sir.
Now can we please get on?
My lord. Mr. King, when did you first meet Dr. Boyd?
1967, towards the end of my second ministry.
Second?
Ministry. I've had 3 distinct phases in my life when I have been called to healing. I was coming to the end of the second one.
And where did you meet him?
St. Mark's Hospital. I was visiting one of his patients who happened to be one of my parishioners. Apart from the illness for which Dr. Boyd was treating him, he had developed extremely painful carbuncle in the groin, but I treated it.
How?
I gave him a healing service.
Yes. And you cured him?
Oh, no. God cured him. I was merely his instrument.
Did Dr. Boyd see this?
No. But he was doing a ward round shortly afterwards, and he looked at the card and he said, I'll try to give you something for your carbuncle when it's ripe. And I said, I think you'll find it's burst. It had. It was drained. He was a quick healer, as I remember.
Was Dr. Boyd impressed?
He said that he'd have to ask me on the staff, cut the cost of the NHS. He was speaking humorously, of course.
Of course. Did you get to know him after that?
Oh, yes, very well. We used to meet at the hospital occasionally. He always had a cheery word. He used to say to me, run your hands down the ward and clear this lot for me. He was being
humorous, yes, of course. Now, when did either of you first mention the idea of the healing hand?
Oh, about a year afterwards, 1968, sometime in the summer.
Who brought it up?
He did.
And what was your reaction?
Oh, I wouldn't look at it. You see, I'd lost my powers of healing. God gives, but, well, one gets tired and unworthy in so many ways until you wake up one morning and find God has taken away.
And yet Dr. Boyd eventually persuaded you?
Yes.
Now, the court understands that the Jordan Foundation that made the initial grants to your charity is a religious foundation.
Yes.
So Dr. Boyd needed a clergyman. Well, now, couldn't he have found another?
Not one who knew Harry Wyatt.
Ah, the active trustee of the Jordan Foundation.
Yes.
Yes, now, do you mean that you were the one with the important contact in that foundation?
Oh, yes. You don't suppose that he would have, that Dr. Boyd, would have tolerated me for a minute otherwise, do you?
Now, after the meeting with Mr. Wyatt at the Great Western Hotel, when Dr. Boyd dropped a glass from the bar, will you tell us what happened as you remember it?
It was a remarkable moment. He dived for the glass and slipped a disc.
How did you diagnose that?
Oh, it's not uncommon. I've seen it happen before. Well, I helped him to a chair. I felt the tips of my fingers tingle. I said, "Do you mind if I pray?" And he said, "You can sing the whole hymn book over me if you like." Well, then I laid my hands on him. I felt the warmth and saw the colors for the first time in 2 years.
Warmth? Colors?
Yes, silver, blue, red, you sometimes see when it's working strongly.
Yes, and?
Well, then, Dr. Boyd got up, he turned his head from side to side and he said, "That's a bloody miracle."
He was genuinely impressed.
Oh, yes.
Did you discuss faith healing with him after that incident?
Oh, yes. That was when he thought up the name, the Healing Hand.
Who thought it up?
Why, Dr. Boyd, of course. He was intensely curious about healing. He wanted to investigate it, to find out whether there was anything in it. But my doubts, my struggle with myself about the enterprise were over.
Why?
Why? Because my healing powers had been restored to me, there in that bar with Dr. Boyd. The Lord wanted me to do this work. It isn't always easy, you see. People think that, well, the one's a bit nutty, you see.
Now, apart from its prospects as a nursing home, was there any other reason why you wanted to buy Oaks Green?
Oh, yes. On January the 29th, 1973, I went over Oaks Green the second time. I was by myself.
It was empty then?
Oh, yes. I must have lost count of time. I suddenly realized it was growing dark. I felt rather apprehensive, well, frightened almost. You see, I was no longer young, nor even middle-aged, and I wanted to know whether I should continue with this work. I went into the house. My Bible was on a broken chair that someone had left behind, near the window that someone had opened to let out the stale air. I took up the book, asking for a message, in the first passage that I came across. The page was whipped out of my hand. At first I thought it was the wind, but then there was a blur in front of my eyes as all the other pages flitted past. I put up my hand to stop them, and it was as if my hand had been hammered. The fingers were curled over and bruised. In the center of my palm appeared the head of a nail. I don't know how long the vision lasted, but when it was over, I was at peace. I knew what I must do. I knew what had led me to this house in the first place. I knew we should have to buy this house, that we must build a small chapel, and that it was here that the work of healing must be done.
Now, was the chapel within the trust deed?
Oh, yes.
And apart from the chapel, how else did you visualize the development of Oaks Green?
Oh, as an orthodox nursing home on the lines of Market Cross.
Did you put this argument before Dr. Boyd and Miss Fanshawe?
Yes, he thought it was a delightful setting, but he ruled it out on price.
Was that his sole argument against it?
It was the one he put forward. I think his mind was on America.
And Miss Fanshawe?
Oh, no, she wouldn't look at it. Our relationship had deteriorated, I'm afraid. Healing prayers don't mix very well with tea at 4:30 and the drug round at 8 o'clock on the dot.
When did you buy Oaks Green?
Now, let's see. Dr. Boyd had gone to America. The price had dropped. I discussed it with Mr. Morgan, who was acting in Dr. Boyd's place. We agreed that, well, charity couldn't afford to miss such an opportunity.
Now, in this figure of 4,650, we have £1,200 to Mrs. Lloyd, the housekeeper. Was she your housekeeper?
Oh, no. No, she was rather the house's keeper. Without her, the place would have gone to rack and ruin. And I thought that an ex-nurse might be useful, you see, to the...
Now, can you tell the court why you began living at Oaks Green in the first place?
I found that I had come to live at Oaks Green because the work was there, without taking any conscious decision to do so.
Yes. Do you live in luxury there, Mr. King?
Not exactly. My room has a bed, a chair, and a table.
Thank you.
Mr. King, when did you retire from Holy Innocents Market Cross?
Oh, 1972.
Making way for the next man and moving to where?
5 Victoria Lodge, Fulchester Road.
To your postal address, yes. This is what is euphemistically described as a lower ground floor flat, isn't it?
It's a 2-room basement with bathroom and kitchen.
Didn't it feel somewhat inadequate after a 7-room vicarage?
Oh, it was better.
Better?
The vicarage was almost impossible to heat.
Mr. King, in September 1972, you retire from a 7-room vicarage to a 2-room basement flat. Within a year, while Dr. Boyd is in America, you are ensconced in a beautiful house at Oaks Green. Now, is not the simplest explanation that you could not stand the sudden, enforced poverty of the 2-room basement flat, and taking advantage of your position as a trustee, you moved into Oaks Green?
I live in 1 room there. I don't mind poverty. I don't have your values. They provide your simple explanation, not mine.
The case of the Queen against King will be concluded tomorrow in the Crown Court. Has the Reverend Francis King stolen £4,650 from the charity Healing Hand, of which he is a trustee? Is he living in a house bought with the charity's money? Or was it his co-trustee, Dr. Boyd, who neglected the charity? Was it the prejudices of the matron Pauline Fanshawe against faith healing which blocked King's efforts to run the charity in Boyd's absence? Has he, as his defence claims, spent the money honestly and legitimately within the charity's aim of providing medical and spiritual care for the chronically ill?
May the witness be shown Exhibit 4, please. Mr. King, in the trust deed, the object of the healing hand, as my learned friend has emphasised, is described as the medical and spiritual care of the chronically ill.
Yes.
Where does it say spiritual healing?
I beg your pardon?
It says spiritual care, not healing, doesn't it?
Ah, care means healing, you see.
I'm afraid I don't see. Wouldn't an orthodox churchman regard spiritual care as care for the soul, not the body?
I'm not very orthodox, you see.
Yes, I've gathered that. You've no proof that your interpretation is the right one, have you?
Oh, no.
Dr. Boyd, in signing this, can well argue, as he does, that care for the soul was implied.
Ah, no, you see, we definitely agreed that spiritual healing would be carried out eventually.
And why didn't you have it written down here, in the trust deed?
Well, there were 1 or 2 trustees of the Jordan Foundation, not Harry White, who might have frowned on it a little.
You concealed it from him, you mean? Well, that was very dishonest of you, wasn't it?
Well, yes, perhaps. But I only left something out in order to get the bequest, in exactly the same way as Dr. Boyd, in agreeing to spiritual care, put something in.
Yes, very well. Suppose we accept for the moment that spiritual care implies healing. Let's have a look at the economics of this spiritual care, shall we? Let's see how you live at Oaks Green. You have your own room?
Yes.
Bed, table, chair, rush matting. Very hermit-like. You use the bathroom and the toilet?
Occasionally.
There are extensive grounds of an acre. You walk about in those?
Yes, I walk about in those.
Exhibit 6, please. This large, luxuriously appointed room, you use this as a study?
This is a picture of the chapel.
A chapel? With a desk in it?
I do work at that desk.
What work?
For the Healing Hand.
But it's all done at Market Cross at the nursing home, isn't it?
But this is where I do my spiritual work. This is the room where I saw the nail in my palm. This is where I give special healing sessions and hold services.
In these easy chairs?
The disabled need easier chairs than most of us.
Well then, let's take the period April 1973 to April 1974, shall we, and see how the disabled benefited from the £4,650 that you spent. Exhibit 2, Matron's Diary, please. Now you'll see that there are 5 recorded visits, 2 in August, 8 people from the home in one trip, 7 in the next, 2 similar trips in September and 1 in October. Now there are scattered visits of individuals driven by you to enjoy the healing influence of Oaks Green, totalling 12. So that's 12 plus 5 makes 17. How many times a week did you visit Market Cross?
3 times, roughly.
Well, let's say 3 times 50 weeks a year, making 150 journeys. 150 plus 100 plus 17 makes 167. Now the journey is 30 miles there and back. That's 5,010 miles. Now to be very generous to you, let's say that the bus did 10 miles to the gallon. That makes 500 gallons. To be even more generous to you, let's say that petrol costs at the time were 50p per gallon. That'll be £250. Now you have here a repair bill for £72, road fund tax 25, well, let's say £100, shall we? That makes 100 plus 250, £350 total. And you have recorded here £650. £350 at the very outside we have accounted for. What happened to the other £300? It's rather a lot of petrol, isn't it?
May have gone on some more repairs.
Have you any record of them? Which garage did you use? Can you remember?
I don't know.
No.
No, yes, I do. I remembered. I had to buy some new... Yes, I bought 2 new tyres.
2 new tyres. Well, let's say £20, shall we? We're down to £280.
Figures... I can't cope with figures, you see.
Well, you're rather more honest with this item. Other running expenses, £400. What were they?
Office expenses, paper, stationery, postage stamps. You know, you can't account for each postage stamp that you buy.
We are not talking about postage stamps, Mr. King. We are talking about £400. Well, things like advertisements. Exhibit 9, please. Reverend Francis King, M.A., Oaks Green Healing Sanctuary. Private sittings, absent healing, positive help for arthritis, asthma, nervous disorders of all varieties, rheumatism, growths and other unyielding conditions. Voluntary donations. You placed this advertisement in the Psychic Weekly, the Healer, and other papers.
Yes.
As a private individual?
No, it's part of the Healing Hand.
There's no mention of the Healing Hand here. I mean, your name is mentioned. The Oaks Green Healing Sanctuary is mentioned, but there's nothing about the Healing Hand. How did you pay for these advertisements?
With my own money.
Out of your pension of £700?
Out of some savings.
But surely, if it was an official activity of the Healing Hand, you could have legitimately used the trust money, couldn't you? Well, why didn't you? Well, since you didn't use the trust money, but your own, how can you describe it as a legitimate activity of the Healing Hand?
Well, some of the money you were talking about may have gone on advertisements.
I see. Some of this unaccounted for £400. £700.
May have.
Then why is there no commensurate income recorded?
What?
In these advertisements you asked for voluntary donations. Were they so unsuccessful that they did not produce a single one?
Oh, no, they produced some.
Yes, well, what happened to the money then?
But not a great deal.
But what happened to it?
I gave it all to Miss Fanshawe.
You did what?
I gave it to Miss Fanshawe. It was just
Yes, Miss
before
Fanshawe.
Christmas, 1974. I went to see Miss Fanshawe. She was very worried about how the funds were being used. And I begged her to take over the accounts.
You begged her?
Yes. I'm no good with money, you see.
Mr. O'Connor, doubtless you would like to recall Miss Fanshawe on these points?
Yes, my lord, I would appreciate that.
Yes, Mr. Honeycomb?
No objection, my lord.
Thank you. Now, your visits to Mr. Morgan, the trustee appointed in Dr. Boyd's place. They're very frequent, weren't they? Several times a week?
Sometimes twice a day.
Yes, to sign these cheques that we've referred to.
Yes, that was one of the things.
Yes, a lot of journeys, weren't there, just to sign these cheques? Was that because he took rather a lot of persuading?
He is very ill.
Yes, but surely, when people are very ill, don't they tend to give in rather easily? All these expenditures that on this list, all these cheques. He knew exactly what he was signing for, did he?
Oh, yes.
Oh, really? You told him all about this chapel, did you? These paintings, these luxurious furnishings?
Oh, not in detail, no.
Not in detail, no. Otherwise he wouldn't have signed the cheques, would he?
Yes.
Well, we've only your word for that, haven't we?
He believed in the work I was doing.
Well, how much did he know of what you were doing?
He saw me work.
He saw... You mean at Oaks Green?
I was giving him services. That's why I visited him so frequently. That's why he came to believe.
Even though, far from being cured, he did in fact die.
There's no cure for that. I helped, through God, to ease his suffering, give him peace and comfort, natural sleep, without drugs.
Just forgive me, but this is a secular court, and I must ask you secular questions. Did you ask him to sign the cheques before administering to him or afterwards?
Afterwards.
Thank you. 1948, when you were vicar of Berrymore in the Pennines, were there not strong local protests about services of healing and the money-raising campaigns associated with them?
Yes.
9 years later, in 1957, when you were vicar in Latchford, Wiltshire, were you not in trouble again over a little matter of a legacy?
A lady upon whom I had carried out some healing work left some money to the church.
To the church? Or to you?
To me, to carry on the work of healing.
I suggest to you there's very much a pattern here, isn't there? In 1958, you leave your living, and you lose your vicarage. And you don't get another until 1960. But your healing activities, they provide a legacy to cover the gap. In 1972, 73, when you retire and again lose your vicarage, again your healing activities spring into prominence. I put it to you The truth is that your main motive for staying is not to provide for others, but to provide for yourself, isn't it?
Now, Mr. Morgan, the replacement trustee, he was impressed by what you could do for him?
He was in a lot of pain. I was able to ease that for him.
Now, Miss Fanshawe has in fact testified that he had refused drugs.
Yes, he did. He was on morphine. That clogs the mind, the spirit.
You saw him when he was on drugs?
Yes.
How did his state of mind on drugs compare with his state of mind after your treatment?
Well, in the one he was, well, drugged, wandering. In the other he was tired but peaceful. He knew where he was.
And that was when he signed the checks?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, my lord.
Miss Fanshawe, in Christmas 1974, did Mr. King beg you to take over the accounts?
Oh, it was just one of his red herrings.
Do you remember...
Just one moment, Mr. O'Connor. What do you mean, Miss Fanshawe, one of his red herrings?
Well, when he knew I'd been to see Mr. Morgan, he was most concerned. Well, he wanted to involve me, you see, so I couldn't say anything.
Miss Fanshawe, this is your interpretation of something which you have denied happening. Did Mr. King ask, indeed beg you to take over the accounts?
He was trying
Now
to...
answer the question, Miss Fanshawe. This is most important.
Yes, he did.
Yes, thank you.
Why didn't you take them over?
They were in such a mess. Everything was in a mess. I was frightened.
Frightened?
He draws people into things, and it was all such a mess. Well, why should I be blamed for it all?
No more questions, my lord.
No questions, my lord.
You may leave the witness box, Miss Fanshawe.
Call Gerald Brady.
Gerald Brady, please. This way, sir.
Would you prefer to sit, Mr. Brady?
No, sir. Thank you, sir. I can stand.
Yes, so I observe, but would you rather sit?
No, sir.
You are a sufferer from multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
One of Dr. Boyd's patients.
No. One of his.
But you were under Dr. Boyd. You were under him in 1970.
Yes.
Yes. He found a place for you at the Healing Hand.
I was one of the first there. My mother died, you see. I was very bad. She'd been looking after me. I was in a wheelchair, and he offered me this place.
Yes, yes, thank you. Now, do you remember what happened on March the 1st, 1973?
Yes. Mr. King said, would I like to go and see a house the trust was thinking of buying?
Why you?
Well, I thought it was a bit strange, but that was the Reverend, and it was an afternoon out.
Had he given you any treatment before then?
No. Well, I used to say to him I didn't want to know, because, well, you see, it's terrifying when someone mentions that you might get better. Dr. Boyd, the nurses, they'd always say, well, I think you're about the same, you know, but he...
Now, tell us what happened on March the 1st, 1973 at Oaks Green.
He wheeled me into the chapel. Well, it wasn't the chapel then, just a great bare empty room. He put me in the light by the windows, and he put his hand on my head and on my spine and on my legs, and he said, God wants you to walk, Gerald.
And what happened?
Nothing. Nothing at all. He was very depressed. Then, when we got back, Miss Fanshawe went for him. He said something I didn't catch, and she exploded. You won't get him out of that chair. She didn't mean me to hear, but I did. She made me boil. I gripped the arms of the chair, And I put my feet on the floor and I lifted myself almost half off my chair for a moment.
Yes. Now, at the end of that month, did you see Dr. Boyd and Mr. King in the corridor at Market Cross?
Yes, they'd been in a meeting. They looked as if they'd been having an argument. Mr. King came over to me and asked me what I thought of Oaks Green. I said I thought people could be cured there. He laughed, Dr. Boyd. He said they ought to be at that price.
Now, you believe that you became better by going to Oaks Green?
Yes.
Did other people benefit or believe they benefited from the chapel at Oaks Green?
Oh, yes. It would have been a lot more, but for her.
But Miss Fanshawe?
Yes, she hated him.
Thank you.
Are you sure you wouldn't rather sit, Mr. Brady?
No, sir, I'm perfectly all right.
Oh, very well.
I'll try not to keep you longer than necessary, Mr. Brady.
That's all right.
Is it fair to say that you are the most remarkable example of Mr. King's healing work at Oaks Green?
Well, yes, sir.
Just go back to that first day in March 1973. How did you get to Oaks Green?
He drove us. He borrowed a car.
Wasn't it rather difficult getting in and out?
He helped me.
I'm sure he did, but wasn't it rather difficult? Man in his 60s, rather frail, getting you out of a confined space and into a wheelchair.
My mother had been doing it for years.
Isn't it that at that time that you could already stand and support yourself, albeit for a very, very brief space of time?
No.
Before you even entered the house?
No, I couldn't walk.
I said stand. Dr. Boyd, an expert neurologist, has testified to this court that people with multiple sclerosis have remissions. They get better for a time. Didn't you begin to have your remission before you went to Oaks Green?
That's not true.
This medical report is not true, then. An agreed document, my lord. January the 21st, 1973, stronger, some remission possibly indicated, refer physiotherapist. February the 20th, 1973, physiotherapist reports some marginal improvement in muscle tone.
Nobody ever said anything to me. Nobody. Miss Fanshawe said I'd never walk.
Yes, you're referring to what she said on your return to the nursing home on March the 1st.
She said I'd never get out of my chair.
Well, they weren't quite the words that you reported to my learned friend. Then you quoted her as saying, "You won't get him out of that chair."
Yes.
Are those the words she used?
Yes, they are.
What do you think she meant?
I wouldn't walk, of course. Well, she was wrong.
Couldn't she have meant something else? You won't get him out of that chair. Couldn't she have meant, Mr. King, it won't be you that gets him out of that chair. It'll be a normal, natural remission because one has already begun.
That's not what I understood at all.
You only heard a snatch of the conversation, didn't you? Can you remember anything else other than the sentence that you've quoted?
It was a long time ago, but I know what she meant.
It was a long time ago. Now again, you told my learned friend, it's terrifying when someone mentions you might get better. Will you explain that, please?
Well, you want to get better, but you find suddenly you have to fend more for yourself. There's a lot of problems.
One of them being that if you make the remarkable recovery that you clearly have, that of finding somewhere to live.
Yes.
Will you remind the court of your present address, please?
5 Victoria Lodge, Fulchester Road.
Mr. King's basement flat.
Yes.
Thank you. I've no further questions, my lord.
Now, members of the jury, theft is defined as the dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it. And the defendant in this case is charged with the theft of £4,650. Now, this money falls into two categories, in my view. First, there is £3,950, which has been accounted for on petrol, furnishings, etc., and £700, which has not. You may think that on the whole sick people derived very little benefit from the larger amount, but you must be careful here. Now, was Mr. King genuinely trying to build up an asset for the charity in the future? And was he frustrated in this work by Miss Fanshawe, and latterly by Dr. Boyd? On the second amount of £700, you must simply decide, is Mr. King a rank bad businessman, hopeless with money, as the defense claims, or is he hiding behind that facade in order to dip his hand into the till? This is the final question that you must put to yourselves, and I now ask you to retire and consider your verdict.
All stand. Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you're all agreed?
Yes.
Do you find the defendant, the Reverend Francis King, guilty or not guilty of the offence with which he's charged?
Guilty.
The Reverend Francis King was sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment, suspended for 2 years.